from Georgia. Thomas from Poland. And Manuela from Germany. Okay, folks. Chapter 14. We will learn together today. Chapter 14 in one word is midas. Midas means the rank, the measure. We spoke about different levels of a Beinoni, of this intermediate person. But what is, so to speak, the bottom line? That's the midah. What is that measure? What is the ultimate measure of the Beinoni? So the Alter Rebbe says, and these are powerful words for me, for all of us, is that the Beinoni is something that's attainable by every individual. Each person can strive after it, and we shouldn't think it's beyond our reach. Meaning that a person at any time can be a Beinoni, which means that you don't abhor evil. In other words, truly abhor it in your heart, because you love God so much that you abhor that anything is contrary to God. That's entrusted to the heart. And the heart, the Beinoni doesn't have that kind of mastery, that kind of control. But the Beinoni does have control at any time that they want, that they can turn away from evil and do good. In actual practice, meaning in deed, in action, in speech, and in thought. In a thought that is a willful thought, a meditated thought, not a thought that enters our mind that we have no control over, but of the willful engagement, meditation, cogitation of a thought. That we have the choice, the ability and the freedom at any given moment to act, speak, and think as we truly want, and meaning we can go contrary to our heart's desire. Our heart has an urge that we don't have a capability of transforming. The righteous do, but not the Beinoni. And yet that urge, that your heart's desire, you can go au contraire. You can do the contrary in your actions, in your speech, and even in your thought process. So a negative thought comes into your mind about a loved one that about a loved one, your own child, your own parent, your own spouse. A negative thought, not a thought that how you can help that person, but a negative thought. Oh, no. So that thought, the urge in the heart, we cannot control the Beinoni. Tzaddik, yes, but the righteous, yes, but not the Beinoni. And yet, when it comes to our thoughts, we don't have to play that. We can push it away. We have the choice, the ability, the freedom, right? That's unique to the human being. A lion can't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be a pussycat. Its nature is its nature. But the human being does not have to seek self-gratification, does not have to be self-absorbed in seeking pleasure, but can do the contrary and therefore stay away from evil and do good. So this is the bottom line. A Beinoni wants not to be disconnected from God and wants to be at all times connected to God by doing what's right and staying away from what's wrong. How does Beinoni? So the Alter Rebbe now gives kind of a conversation that the Beinoni has in his or her mind and says the following: I don't want to be a wicked person even for a moment. Even, in other words, if I have a cogitated thought, if I think that negative thought for a moment willfully, at that moment, I'm evil because I'm entertaining an evil thought that I shouldn't have. Again, what's defining the evil is not the discussion here. Jewish law tells us very clearly, right? But I shouldn't say something that's evil. I shouldn't do something that's evil because I do not want to be parted from God, severed from Him, God forbid, for a moment. And iniquities separate us from God. Sin separates us from God. Now, what does mean separates from God? Ultimately, God is still connected with us on a deeper level of the soul, but on the revealed level of the soul, in that moment, there's a disconnect. We're separated. And the Beinoni doesn't want to be separated for a moment. Not only that, that's from the negative side. But on the positive side, he says, I desire to unite my nefesh, ruach, and neshama, three parts of the soul that are integrated within the individual that we have conscious awareness and capability of connecting with, that I want that all those levels of those parts of the soul to be totally connected with God through doing a mitzvah and studying Torah. That's what I desire, to unite with him with a love of God that is surely in my soul, that's there, even if I might not feel it, which is a love that is in the divine soul of every Jew. And he explains, even the Kal Shebekalim, meaning the most removed Jew, would be ready to give up their lives for the sake of God. They wouldn't deny him, because at that moment they know that there's a disconnect, something we're going to deal more in chapters 18 and 19 at great length. In other words, that there is a complete disconnect, that, to give up, as there's been throughout the ages, the Jews have at, the cross or the sword, and they took the sword. Even though, and again, we'll deal with it at greater length in chapters 18, 19, so we'll leave that discussion for later. But the point that is over here is that when the simple Jew recognizes that in this act, I'm going to separate myself from God, they're ready to die. They're ready to die for their faith. So the Beinoni is saying to himself, or to herself, I don't want to be fooled like this simpleton that thinks only when it comes to the sword or my faith, to keep my faith and be killed for it, that's the only time you disconnect from God. That's a fool that thinks that it's the only time. And why do you think that way? Because the spirit of folly enters the individual and thinks that when you think something that's sinful, you say something that is sinful, or do something that's sinful, that there's no disconnect in the moment. Now, of course, afterwards you can reconnect, but in that moment there's a disconnect. The Beinoni says, I don't want to be such a fool. I don't want to have a moment in my life that there is a disconnect from God. And therefore, even when it comes to the smaller things of life, that are not a question of holding on to my faith, where I recognize clearly that there's a disconnect that if I don't hold on to my faith, but in every single moment of my day, there's an opportunity that I can connect or disconnect to God. And therefore, I want to I don't want to deny the truth. And that is the truth. And when you think about it, folks, it really is the truth. Every moment of the day, we have an opportunity either to connect or disconnect to God. Every time we think, speak, and act, meaning every moment of the day. Now, that is the Beinoni, what the conversations, so to speak, in the mind of the Beinoni, in order to help them to always connect and not disconnect from God. Different, however, is, of course, that which is now, that was the conversation, now the Alter Rebbe goes, the different, of course, is what's entrusted in the heart. The heart is not something that he's able or she's able to transform, to absolutely hate, like the perfect righteous person absolutely hates that which is contrary to God and God's holiness, and that the righteous completely only delights in God and godliness, and anything that is contrary to that, they absolutely hate that. That's something that in the world to come, when Mashiach will come, we'll all have that. But today, the Beinoni doesn't have that. We're not, there are only certain people that are privileged to be able to have that gift, that their heart is totally transformed in a complete righteous, or more or less completely, not completely transformed, but transformed in such a way that it's so minimal, the urges, the lusts, and of the heart of the incomplete tzaddik. This is a gift that comes from above, and It's metaphorically like the gifts that were given to the Kohanim, to the priests, the ones who served in the Holy Temple. The Alter Rebbe brings down. Now, therefore, if you recall in chapter 1, we quoted from Job, Eov, that he said that you created the righteous. So with this now we can understand what that statement means. It means created the righteous because very few people have been given the capability of transforming the urges of the heart, the negativity of the heart, the self-directed nature of the heart that is a comfort creature, a pleasure-seeking, being. That is only to the few. And that's what it means you created the tzaddikim, the righteous, meaning you created them that they have the potential that they can become that. They're not created, they're not born that way. They have to work on themselves to become the Beinoni, and from the Beinoni to become the righteous. But those are very few people that can become that, and especially a complete righteous individual. Now with this, the Alter Rebbe, as opposed to the Beinoni, who will struggle with the urges of the heart, the desires of the heart that are for comfort, that are for pleasure, pleasure seeking, and so on. But the Beinoni will always be successful, will always be able to conquer in the behavior, which is action, speech, and thought. Again, when we speak about thought, we're speaking about a willful thought, not the thought that enters, which comes from the urge of the heart, the desire of the heart. With this, the Alter Rebbe says, now we can understand that in the very beginning of Tanya, we said Tanya, beside Per Gimel Nida, we learned, Tanya means that it was learned in a Braisa in the 3rd chapter of the tractate of Nida, Mashbi Moiseti at Tzaddik, that a person, before they come into this world, their soul is given an oath, they should be righteous, and that you shouldn't be wicked. Well, how does that make sense? If you're given an oath, which means you're given the capability in your soul to be righteous, so then why are you giving the oath that you shouldn't be wicked? So you're going to be righteous. Obviously, that will include not being wicked. So the answer is what we just said. Not everybody can become righteous. So therefore, there's the second part of the oath, at least don't be wicked, meaning be a Beinoni, who's got complete mastery over thought, speech, and action, complete mastery over their behavior, of the garments of self-expression of the soul, complete mastery. At least be that. So then comes the question, well, we just said that not everybody can have that capability of being righteous. It's a gift that's given to above to very few people. Very few. By the way, most people you think are righteous are not righteous. They're not. Because all you're seeing is their behavior. You don't know what's going on if they're struggling with anything, with any negativity from within. And pray tell they are. Unless you're talking about the Rebbe. About a Rebbe, that's a different story. But speaking to people that you think that, In any case, so then comes back the question, well, if not everybody has the capability of being the righteous, so why are we giving the oath to be righteous? Here the Alter Rebbe introduced an interesting idea. He said that even though we can't become righteous, and you're a Beinoni, at least fulfill the oath of being righteous and work on being similar to the righteous. And what does that mean to be similar to the righteous? What is the difference between a righteous person, at least on the very surface level, the simple level, between the righteous and the Beinoni, is that the Beinoni doesn't abhor evil and only delight in God, because in their heart they have urges, passions that are not unto God, that are self-directed, again, pleasure-seeking, comfort seeker, and so on. So the Alter Rebbe says you got to fulfill that oath. How do you fulfill that oath? By working on yourself to abhor evil. What's evil? Well, if you have, sexual lust, that's in the heart. So work on yourself to abhor that sexual lust. The sexuality is a part of, is not a sin between husband and wife. Right. It's though it is there as on this higher level as a way to provide for your loved one, for your spouse, as opposed to just fulfilling your desire. I don't want to get off on that too much, but therefore work on, and further, the pleasure that we seek in the palate. Think about what becomes of food in the end. It becomes, if you leave it out, it rots. What becomes of it? And when you think about it, then you're not so desireful for it. Now, there's the Alter Rebbe saying that work on ways that you can come to abhor being a pleasure seeker as an end in itself, a comfort seeker as an end in itself. Think about the ways and means that will bring you to not seek the pleasure and comfort in those things. And further, contemplate about God, about your relationship to God, God's relationship to the world that will bring you a delight in God. That's a love of God. All of these things, and even though you're not going to become a righteous person, perhaps at least but through that contemplation, it'll become more of a second nature rather than a transformation of the animal soul, which is by the righteous. Or further, the Alter Rebbe says, when you do that, then there might be a righteous individual that you are connected to, that their soul will kind of become connected with you in such a way, it's like the metaphor is impregnate, right? In other words, give you something in your soul that you don't really have naturally, the capability of being righteous, but because of the great effort that you have to try to fulfill the oath of being a righteous person by abhorring evil and loving and delighting only in God, you'll get a part of that. This is very high level we just spoke about. Almost like regret in a way to say it, because I'm afraid of where we might go with this. We have to be careful. We're talking about a Beinoni, someone who's got complete mastery over their behavior. To come to a level to fulfill the oath of being righteous, we got to work on being a Beinoni. So we got to be careful with this notion. However, you know what? Sometimes it does help. And I would say with food, to think, because food is something that is definitely a very natural thing that we appreciate, enjoy, have the pleasure, and that we think from time to time that, what does it become when you leave it out to rot? What does it become in us, afterwards? Besides the flesh and blood, it becomes another part of us too that we release. So when you think about it in that terms, it takes away a little bit of that pleasure, if not a lot of it. And at least we don't become so identified with food and so driven by it and so, being that pleasure seeker, which that has a value. That definitely has a value. We're not going to become righteous as a result of thinking of that. We shouldn't fool ourselves. This is a very high level, and that's why I'm saying to be careful with this. If you're not ready for it, don't even try it. If it sounds a little weird to you, don't go there today. Don't go there yet. There's a lot to learn in Tanya that we need to introduce in our lives before that we can introduce the idea of fulfilling the oath of being righteous. If it resonates with you and you want to incorporate some of the ideas of that meditation, of those things that will bring you to have it, we're not going to abhor pleasure. We're not there. That's a righteous person. But at least what it will do is minimize how much pleasure we're driven by materialism, whether it's food or other materialism, when we think that way. when we meditate and think, and bring that into our lives. That's healthy if we do it in the right way and the healthy way. But the most important thing, the bottom line, in a couple of words, what is his chapter? Midas, the rank, the measure of the Beinoni. Don't want to be disconnected. Always want to be connected to God Almighty. Always staying away from evil in thought, speech, and action, and always trying to do good, another mitzvah. At every moment, we have the opportunity. When you think about it, we do, every single moment. Because we're thinking something at a moment, right? Now, we can't control what that thought comes into my mind, but I can control after the thought enters my mind if I'm going to willfully allow it to be entertained in my mind and cogitate it, meditate it, think it, or not. That is the bottom line. Is that we think that way more throughout our day, that is this moment, is this now what I'm engaged in? Is this thought, these words that I want to express, this action that I want to do, is this connecting me to God or disconnecting me from him? We live a little more that way. Just use that notion, live that way more in our lives today. One more time than we did previously, and little by little we think this way and then become a part of who we are. Wow, are we changed people? All right, Julie from Florida, shalom. Who else is joining us over here? Rivka from Germany, gut Woch. Eleanor from Amsterdam, if I recall correctly, good afternoon. Jason is with us from Montreal. Anna, shalom. Linda from New York, welcome. Maria, shalom. Batya, good morning. Team in Austin, Texas. Stanley, Boker Tov. Shoshana, shalom. Denise from New York, Boker Tov. Mike, good morning. Gregory, shalom. Goldie, Shavua Tov. Yeah, so Elsa's asking, will we all be tzaddikim when Mashiach comes? Absolutely. I mean, will we all? Yes. Yeah, even more than just regular tzaddik, like our Rebbe. David Shavua Tov. Tony from Costa Rica, good morning. Laura from Nashville, Tennessee, good morning. Teresa, shalom. Sina. Oh, thank you, Sina. She's saying that she's learned this for a second and third time, and now she's getting it. All right, that's great. You know what? It does take some time because these are lofty ideas that are paradigm shifts. So, yeah, Kareem, blessings. Shaheen, good morning from New York. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Alice. Yes. Elaine, thank you. Stanley. All right. Thank you for sharing. And Darren from Saskatchewan. We have, from Sao Paulo, Brazil, joining us. From Arizona, Boston, Karen. On Instagram, folks, if you can give me your name and where you're from, that would be amazing. Jonathan from New York. Fanny from Brazil, welcome. Okay, can't make out over here. All right, folks. Oh. All right, sharing is caring. Please share the Alter Rebbe's teachings with others. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful week and a good Tvach, Shavua Tov, a wonderful good week.